Welcome, everybody. This is our monthly gathering of the entire Hopium Chronicles community. It's great to be here with all of you. We're here in part celebrating our first birthday. Hopium Chronicles began on March 7th, 2023. It's been a lot of fun so far. I'm having a great time and feel like we're building something meaningful together. And I'm just grateful that all of you are here. And for those of you who are paid subscribers, just extra special thank you for providing the resources to allow this place to go and for us to spread hopium all over as we do together. So thank you all. It's really been a lot of fun. And I'll be talking more about year two in the coming days. But what I want to get to tonight, because it's election time and want to get right to it. I mean, the general election has begun. And I did an interview with Greg Sargent today on the New Republic podcast where we talked about how those of us who are in the business evaluate the health of a candidate or a political party in ways that go way beyond polling, right? I mean, so much of our daily commentary in American politics is based on polling, often low sample, not high quality polls, but it's based on polling. It's so polling centric. But if you're in the business, when you sit down with somebody else who's in the business, you talk about polling, but you talk about fundraising and the quality of the staff and the campaign team that's being built. And you talk about the arguments the two candidates have, the baggage they have, the history of a campaign or a candidate winning elections in previous elections. You look at a lot more than just polling. Polling's part of it. Polling's important. Polling matters, right? But it's a piece. And in 2022, part of what Tom Bonnier and I did and why we got the election right when many didn't was we opened up our understanding of the election to go beyond polling, what was happening in voting in the special elections and voter registration and fundraising and other things that were out there that gave us a more complete picture of what was happening in American politics. And so it's not that I don't care about polling, it's that I think polling is only a piece of the information that's available to us to assess relative health of a campaign or a candidate or a political party as we head into the election. And so let me, in that spirit of widening our understanding of what's available to us and the way that people who are in the business look at these things, let me tell you what I see now and how I see the election. And it comes down to these three basic points. One is that Joe Biden is a good president. The country is better off. We're going to have a very strong argument for re-election. Two is the Democratic Party is strong in winning elections all across the country. And three, they have Trump. And we're going to get into what they have Trump means, but I think you all know what that means, is that they're saddled with the worst candidate who's ever run for president in all of our history. And when I look at all of these things together, I would, in every way imaginable, 8 months before the election, I would much rather be us than them. And now let's go into those, break those three things down. Number one, Joe Biden's been a good president. The country's better off. I think at this point, that's become now the conventional wisdom in some ways. I mean, I think we were sort of challenging conventional wisdom when I was arguing this, but we know that on the central promise that he made to us, that he was going to get us to the other side of COVID successfully, he's done that. And today, the American economy is the strongest of any G7, any advanced economy in the world. Inflation's lower here than any other advanced economy in the world. That we have GDP growth has been over 3% for over 3 years, which is historically very strong. The stock market is breaking records. We have the best job market in America since the 1960s, the lowest uninsured rate in American history. Real wages are galloping and strong right now. We've had record new business formation in the United States. Prime age worker participation rates are the highest ever recorded. And we know that inflation has been too high. Inflation that was a global phenomenon driven in part by supply chain crises and the war in Ukraine. But it's come way down and it's now very close to being at the place that we need it to be. America's far better off today. And we also know that the president has passed these three major investment bills that are restoring the kind of level of public investment in the future of the country that we had when many of us were much younger, that we haven't seen in decades. And those investments are not only going to accelerate our ability to move from a fossil fuel economy to a cleaner and more sustainable economy, but it's also going to create opportunity for our workers for a generation to come, prosperity and opportunity for our workers. So for young Americans today, Joe Biden has made historic investments in their future that are going to be paying out in their work life and their family life for for a generation or more. We also know that for young people, the data is very encouraging, right? If you're a young person in America today, you're entering the best job market for any set of young people since the 1960s. Fewer young people are without health insurance than any time in modern history. We have, we've seen the president has forgiven over $130 billion in student loan debt. We know that Gen Z homeownership rates are actually higher at this stage in their lives than Gen X and millennial. We know because of the Democratic Party that the minimum wage has been raised in cities and counties and states all across the country, creating a higher floor for American workers than before for young workers coming into the workforce. But we also know that the crime rate has come down in America. It was much higher under Donald Trump. We know that we have now record domestic production of all types of energy, gas, oil, renewables, making us more energy independent than we've been in generations. I can go on and on and on. The president made a very compelling case for himself in the State of the Union last week. And if you haven't had time to watch it, I would certainly encourage everyone here to take time to watch the whole speech, because he laid out a very powerful case for his own reelection and for the centrality of the fight over democracy, which we'll get into a little bit more later. So number one, Joe Biden has been a good president. The country's better off. I think we have a very powerful case to make for his reelection. Number two, Democrats are winning elections all over the country. We know that in 2018 and 2020, we defeated MAGA and took away the House, the Senate, and the presidency from the Republicans. But what's happened since is in some ways almost more miraculous, because parties in power in our political system almost always lose seats. They lose midterm elections, they lose special elections, they lose off-year elections. Power ebbs away from the party in power traditionally and often in our history. And that hasn't happened in this last few years. We've actually gained ground in 2022, 2023, and 24. It's something historically anomalous is happening in the United States. And it's my view that what happened is that the combination of the insurrection that happened after the election in 2020 and then Dobbs in the spring of 2022 has sort of broken the Republican Party. That for many Republicans, it just was a bridge too far. MAGA had become dangerous. It was those boys playing around that, had live fire in their guns, and things were getting scary and dangerous for a lot of Republicans, some big chunk of Republicans. And ever since Dobbs in the spring of 2022, Democrats have overperformed in election after election of every kind all across the country now over 3 calendar years, and Republicans have struggled. In 2022, we gained a Senate seat, we gained state legislative chambers, we gained governorships. In the battleground states that are going to be now, central to everything we do, we actually gained ground over 2020 in Arizona, Colorado, Georgia, Minnesota, Michigan, New Hampshire, and Pennsylvania. We got to 59% in Colorado, 57% in Pennsylvania, 55% in Michigan, 54% in New Hampshire. Those would have been extraordinary results in a good year. And this was a year where we had high inflation and low Biden approval. A supposed red wave was coming. And in those battleground states, we actually defeated MAGA. MAGA failed. The Trumpy candidates that ran in all these battleground states failed. And we litigated MAGA heavily in 2022 in these same battlegrounds where we're going to be conducting the presidential election. And MAGA failed and in 2022. And then the question would be, as we enter 2023, is would that same dynamic of Democratic overperformance and Republican struggle show up in elections in 2023? And it did. We flipped the Wisconsin Supreme Court seat in April, and we took away the rancid redistricting program in Wisconsin. We then took away Colorado Springs and Jacksonville, Florida in May of 2023. And then we took away the 6-week abortion ban over 2 ballot initiatives in Ohio, which I know many of you worked on, and we got to 57% in those 2 Ohio ballot initiatives. And then we took away the Virginia State House, and we took away this fantasy idea that the 15-week abortion ban was somehow going to be an escape hatch for the Republicans in the 2024 elections, and bloodied Glenn Youngkin, who had this aspiration of becoming the next up for the Republican Party. huge victory. And just recently, because of that victory and because of the work we and many other people did in this country, Virginia just elected their first Black Speaker of the House in the heart of the Confederacy, a remarkable achievement. And we also gained ground in New Jersey. Andy Beshear won by a bigger margin in 2023 than he did in 2019. We picked up mayoralties and city council races and school board races all across the country. There was a blue wave that washed across the United States in 2023. It was a remarkable performance. Again, despite the understanding that a red wave, we're still all waiting for the red wave, a year and a half later. And then in 2024, this same dynamic, Democratic overperformance, Republican struggle, has showed up again. We flipped a state house seat in Orlando, a critical state house seat controlled by the Republicans. We just blew it out in New York 3 together with Tom Suozzi. And Trump has underperformed all public polling in every state except one in these early states. He's dramatically underperformed polling by 6 to 8 points in Iowa, in South Carolina, in New Hampshire, in these early states. And we know from the early polling that there is a large chunk of the Republican coalition, 20-30% of the voters, the same voters that abandoned the Republican Party in 2022 in the battlegrounds, that have very significant reservations, about Trump, and are unwilling to go along with him. We saw remarkable polling data coming out of Iowa in the very first election this year, where 43% of Haley voters, who were 20% of the electorate, said they were going to vote for Biden in the general election, not Trump. We've never seen polling like that kind of crossover opportunity that we may have with the disgruntled non-MAGA part of the Republican Party. And then, and so we keep winning and they keep struggling. And this has been the central dynamic. And it is, to me, the likely dynamic in this fall is going to be that, just like what happened in the battlegrounds in 2022, Trump will struggle to bring back the Republican coalition, that there'll be too many Republicans that will either not vote for him or vote for Joe Biden. And particularly if we could build this anti-MAGA, this never Trump or never MAGA community into a powerful political force, which it already is, but to grow it into even something more powerful. Imagine if Mitt Romney and Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger and all these former or current Republicans, but who are fearful of MAGA, campaign with Joe Biden. We can do something dramatic, I think, and take advantage of this weakness that Republicans have inside their coalition, and not just win the election, but I hope get to 55 in the fall. What is the likely scenario is that Trump struggles to bring his coalition together, bleeds Republican voters in the fall, just in the way it happened in 2022 and has been happening in states like Kansas and Ohio and other places. To me, that's the likely scenario, that we win the election in the way that we won in these same states in 2022, because Trump is even more MAGA. He's super MAGA. And if we've rejected MAGA now in 2018, 2020, 2022, and 2023, and then the candidate and the party present themselves as even more MAGA, telling Haley voters they don't even want them in the party, right? They should get lost and go do something else. What is the political strategy behind that, right? It's the impulsive craziness of a madman who's telling a huge chunk of his coalition to get lost, particularly given he lost the last election. He needs every one of those Haley voters if he's got a shot at winning. And so I think this structural splintering of the Republican Party that we've been seeing in recent elections is the likely scenario for what happens in the fall of 2024. And then finally, Trump. We all have to figure out how to talk about him, right? I mean, I think that the media has to normalize him to some degree and to make him into something far less dangerous than he really is, in order to report on him every day. And we can have a long conversation about this in the Q&A, but I think that we have to recognize that, to me, here's what I see when I see Donald Trump. I see a far weaker candidate than the candidate we ran against in 2020. He's far more degraded. He's more dangerous. He's more extreme. He's much further away from the electorate than he was in 2020. In recent weeks, something very significant has happened, is that the central attacks that Republicans had against Biden, and I'll go through them all, have all evaporated. Number one, the economy is strong. We're not in recession. Number two, inflation is down. It's not up. Number three, violent crime rates and murder rates are down all across the country. There is no crime wave in the United States. Four, one of their biggest arguments about Joe Biden was that he waged a war on energy, which drove up gas prices, which fueled inflation, And in fact, if it was a war on energy, it was a really bad one because, as I said, we had record energy, record oil, gas, and renewable production last year. And America's more energy independent than we've been in 40 years. This was one of the most pernicious and ridiculous lies of the Republican Party in the last few years. If you want to blame somebody for high gas prices, you can blame Vladimir Putin, their buddy over in Moscow. Number 5 is that the border, which is an area where they had enormous challenge, where they had enormous advantage over us, they've now fumbled that out of Trump's impulsivity and his madness. And now we're the party that wants to bring order to the border, and they're the one who wants to, keep it chaotic. I am confident that over time, this position that they've taken on the border is unsustainable for them. And we're now going to be able to get back to even or even ahead on this critical issue, the border. But then the thing that we really know that they were really focused on were these attacks on Biden as a man and as a leader and his family. We just learned that, the Biden crime family narrative was actually a Russian disinformation operation that once again, the Republican Party willingly laundered into our domestic discourse. And then finally, Biden as being old and infirm, which was really at the end of the day, probably the most central argument they've been making over the last couple of years. It was clearly repudiated by his vigorous and strong performance in the State of the Union last week. And also, we've just learned that the special counsel memo, which generated this most recent round of concerns about Biden's age, that this idea that was central to his story that he told, that Biden couldn't remember the date of his son's death, was actually invented and a lie in one of the most despicable things that we've seen in American politics in recent years, which is saying something in the MAGA era. Joe Biden did remember it. We have the transcript. There were no major gaffes or problems or indications of his infirmity or his struggle, right? He actually performed very well under very difficult circumstances. And remember, unlike Donald Trump, who refused to sit down and do interviews, Joe Biden did 5 hours of interviews the day on October 8th and October 9th, the day after October 7th, when he barely had any sleep. He went ahead and did the interviews, and he was exonerated for this. And so this final exonerated for the attempt to claim that he stole America's secrets. And so all of the major indictments of Biden, the attacks on Biden, they've all evaporated in the last few months, leaving them with the crazy orange guy, right? That's all they got now, is that they are becoming a defender. The entire Republican Party now has become a project to keep Donald Trump out of jail. And I will tell you that one of the reasons I'm so optimistic about 2024 winning in November, there are going to be 6 things. I go back to this idea of how campaigns work and people who are in the business. There are going to be 6 things that we're going to be able to communicate to voters in the next few months that they didn't know about Donald Trump in 2020 that are going to become very material into this election. Number 1 is that he raped E. Jean Carroll in a department store dressing room and is now an adjudicated rapist. Number 2 is that he oversaw one of the largest financial frauds in American history, and he's now owes hundreds of millions of dollars in penalties and fines. And he and his family, because 2 of his family members, his 2 sons, have also been banned from doing business in New York. Number 3 is that he stole America's secrets. He lied to the FBI about it. He shared those secrets with other people in what may be one of the greatest security breach in the history of the United States. 4th is that he led an insurrection against America. He led an armed attack on the Capitol on one of the only days that all 435 members are physically present. And he's promised to end American democracy for all time and install himself as a functional dictator if he gets back into the White House in January of 2025. 5th, that he and his family have corruptly taken more money from foreign governments than any political family in American history. And 6th, that he's singularly responsible for ending Roe and stripping the rights and freedoms away from a majority of the population. Any one of those 6 things could disqualify him and push him out of the election. He's going to have to overcome all 6 of those things, in addition to being far more extreme, in addition to his public performance being far more disturbing and erratic and wild and impulsive than it was before. And I just don't think that that's going to be possible for him to overcome these negatives or the baggage that he has, that we call it in the system, because they're unlike the baggage or negatives of any candidate in modern American history, and perhaps in all of our history. And so when I put all this together, everybody, when I see, right, and then what I didn't even get into is, we can get into the Q&A about this, I left it off my little list here, is that the party, we've learned in recent days, is broken, splintering. The RNC is in turmoil. Dozens of Republican Party leaders all across the country have been indicted for trying to overturn an American election. Their thing, the operational side of the business, is in unbelievable, unprecedented disarray. The political party in a general election is the foundation of the House. The campaign runs through the parties. Their party apparatus is in unprecedented disarray. And Donald Trump is leading the ugliest political party in modern American history. When I put all that together, what I see in my head is that what I feel in my bones is that in every way possible, I'd much rather be us than them as we head into here's my dog making a present coming into our chat. I'd much rather be us than them as we head into the 2024 elections. And then finally on polling, and I've gone a little bit long. The way I see polling now is that if you want to see a strong Trump set of polls, you can find those polls. If you want to see a close competitive election now where Biden's even ahead in a lot of polls, you can find those polls. The media, like in 2022, is disregarding the polls that are favorable to us and spending most of their time talking about the polls that are favorable to them. What I see today is a close competitive election. Some of our coalition is wandering. Much of it, I think, will come back once the campaign really begins, as it has. And then we've got a campaign to go get the rest. And so as somebody who's been in this business and working full-time in Democratic politics since the end of 1991, I can tell you that as a professional, and one of the reasons I think there's such quiet confidence in Biden world is that we know, looking at all this, we know what is likely to happen, which is that what's likely to happen is that we're going to win. And what is I hope will happen is that we win by a lot and we make this a repudiation of MAGA. And so the clear, unequivocal signal is that America is looking in the eye of this dark politics and rejecting it with overwhelming force. That's why the work that we do together is so important, because at the end of the day, the reason I think we keep performing at the upper end of what's possible, in addition to everything we've discussed tonight, is all of you. We are building together an unprecedented political machine for the Democratic Party. We have never been stronger as a party than any time that I've been in this business. And your money and your volunteer and the work that you do, the postcards you write, the texts that you send, the calls that you make, the doors that you knock on, everything you do is giving our campaigns more money than they've ever had, more volunteers than they've ever had, and it's taking a Swazi race and taking a 2 to 3 point race and making it an 8-point race. This is our superpower. The thing that makes me more confident than anything else as we go into 2024 is that there are 2 to 3 million Americans who've decided they're not going to let democracy and freedom slip away on their watch. And you guys are going to work. You're putting your head down. You're getting it done. And we just keep winning. And we keep winning because of all of you. I am so proud to be in this fight with everyone here. Hopium has been a wonderful project. And I'm excited to go win this thing together with all of you this year. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to take written, let me explain what's going to happen next is that I'm going to take written questions. So if you want to go into the Q&A, and then Anderson Clayton will be joining us. We'll have a discussion and Anderson Clayton will be joining us in 15 to 20 minutes. And thanks everybody for being here. Let me just, people are expressing what they're doing. Let me talk about there are going to be two things that are going to come up, I think, and I covered a lot of ground. So there are two things that are going to come up that let me address. Biden's age. One is I think he's addressed some of this. It's not going to go away. It's an issue. And I think the way I talk about it is that you can't unpack the success of his presidency from his age. He's been successful because of his age, not in spite of it. And that, his wisdom, we all know, those of us who are formerly young, that with age comes not only losing a step here or there, but comes wisdom, experience, and capacities you didn't have as a younger person. And it may be that in a time of COVID and insurrection and a Russian invasion of Ukraine and all the things that are going on in the world, that having the most experienced person to ever enter the Oval Office in our history was a serious blessing for America and not something other than that. And so I think his age is an issue. We shouldn't run away from it. We shouldn't dismiss it. But I think he's addressing it himself in his public performance, and also by the fact that he's been a really good president and that you can't unpack his success as president from his age. They're connected. The second thing is third parties. I don't know yet, really. I don't think any of us have any idea what's going to happen with third parties. And this isn't 2000. It's not 2016. No election is like any other election. Every election is unique, and this election has its own dynamics. And I think what's most important to me when I look at all this is that the most powerful and potent and serious of the third party, rogue party, splinter party movements in the United States is aligned with us. It's the Never Trump or Never MAGA movement. And so, first of all, whenever you discuss the third party efforts, you should always start with the idea that we have an unprecedented alliance, a pro-democracy alliance that we have the opportunity to build together and to bring in people who are not traditionally part of our coalition in a temporary alliance to defeat MAGA and the Republicans. And I think that if we were in a parliamentary system, we would have already, the Cheney Romney party would have split off from the nationalist MAGA party. And, some of them would have come into our cabinet and we'd be in sort of this grand coalition against the nationalist right. Our system doesn't really work that way, but we have to create some virtual version of that. And it's going to be very important for all of you in your work to create a big seat at our collective table for all the former Republicans or the people who are temporarily aligned with us in this effort to save American democracy. And so first of all, to me, that's the most consequential and material part of this discussion around third parties. Will any of the other candidates amount to anything? The second part of me is skeptical. I think people understand the gravity of this election in ways they didn't in the previous elections. And also the candidates are silly. Robert Kennedy is a silly candidate. Cornel West is a silly candidate. Jill Stein is a silly candidate. These aren't serious people. Now, can they shave off a point or two? Yeah, they can. And the way that we have to deal with that is that there's one response to all of this, which is we have to work harder for Joe Biden. We have to build him up, and we have to win this election by enough that these third-party candidates won't matter. I also think we know from history that we're not going to play patty cake with any of these candidates, and that once the campaign is fully engaged, they're going to be engaging these candidates in ways that we need to engage to degrade them and to make them less of a threat to us in fall. I will say that I want to go on record saying that some of you have asked about young people and digital communications and comms and getting louder and all this stuff. The Biden social media team is incredible. They are doing remarkable work every day. It's really encouraging to me as somebody who's been part of the communication side of this business for a long time and a former television producer and writer. These guys are kicking ass. And I think that if this is the early, they're ambitious, they're aggressive, they're on offense, they're taking it to Trump every day, they're creating news stories. There is a really powerful, this campaign in its early days is looking really capable and strong. I'm feeling really good about what I'm seeing in the early days here. And if you don't follow Biden HQ, it's called Biden Harris HQ. They're on TikTok, they're on Twitter. They're producing TikTok specific kind of these short 10, 12, 15, 20-second clips, sometimes longer for Twitter. But they're operating now in this modern space in a way where they're translating Biden and Biden's values into this modern way of communicating in ways that are frankly better than I thought they would, to be honest. I think that they are translating Joe Biden into this world. And if you looked at what they did yesterday, a very good example of this, which you can find on the internet, the video, it's only like 20 seconds long, and it's Biden on his phone, looking at his phone, wearing his new cool sweater, which I like, by the way. And Biden looking at his phone, and it's Trump saying he's going to cut Social Security. And Biden looks up and says, can you believe he said that? I'm not going to let that happen. And that was sort of it. That was the whole video. And it was short. It was modern. Biden was looking at a video on a phone. He spoke directly to camera. The message was really simple. And it was a great example of the fact that we can even take Joe Biden and translate him and what he's doing into this digital world. And so I'm very optimistic about what I'm seeing in the early stages. Also, the new app is great. The video they've been producing from the very beginning of the campaign has been really strong. I think these guys really are in touch with what is really driving the electorate. And it goes back to the president's speech, which the president began his speech last week, not with the economy and healthcare, but with the threat to democracy that was happening in Ukraine and around the world. And I think that what he understands is the emotional core of our work together, of the modern Democratic Party, is around the defense of freedom and around here and everywhere. And that's really what is bringing us together, this universal desire to make sure that democracy and freedom prevail here and everywhere. And he went right into that, right in the beginning of the speech. He went right into that emotional core, the thing that is the core of our fear and our worry. And it was powerful. And I was really proud of him. He broke the mold. He didn't do the easy thing. He did the thing that was necessary, the hard thing, the necessary thing to begin this difficult conversation he needs to have with the American people about how MAGA and Donald Trump are the greatest threat to American democracy in all of our history. He needs to be able to talk that way. And they began it in that speech in a room full of MAGA, right? He looked at those guys in the eye and he didn't flinch. He didn't yield. He didn't give any ground whatsoever. It was a great speech. And I was really proud of him. Let me go. Oh, just I saw some comments. I'm going to go back into the Q&A. I want to just say one other thing for those of you who have concerns about Biden and young people. And I talked about this in terms of the investments, the IRA, and the investments we've made. I just want to go on the record saying that there is a strong case to be made that Joe Biden has done more to counter climate change than any living person in the world today. And that by moving the entire machinery of the American government to accelerate the energy transition and to imagine and build this new world that we have to all build together, that he's created unstoppable momentum towards this energy transition. And I think we all, I've often said in these discussions that, 30 years from now, when the statues of Joe Biden are built around the United States, what is he going to be remembered for? And it's very possible is that he's the guy that turned the corner on climate change. And I think it's something that we don't talk about enough. And it's something that we have to develop language around and understanding, because I think it's going to be one of the major bridges we're going to have for young people to understand that this guy looked at their future and took unprecedented action. This guy looked at their future and made unprecedented investments in their lives, their prosperity, their capacity to earn a living, to have opportunities that we had. He took unprecedented efforts to preserve democracy for them and their kids. He took unprecedented efforts to pass bipartisan gun safety legislation that we hadn't had in 30 years. He took unprecedented efforts to make sure that they had health care for them and their families. He took unprecedented efforts to create an economy where they had more opportunity and, a better job environment than any group of young people since the 1960s. I mean, we have a very, very powerful case to make for young people. And I'm confident that when the campaign fully engages, we're going to see the kind of results from young people that I think all of us want in this election. Let me just go through and see if I can. People are asking about how to volunteer. My advice to everyone here is there's one thing that everybody has to do, which is to join the Biden campaign. Give $5, $10, $3, whatever the number is. You can do it through the Hopium site. You can do it on your own, because then you're in the campaign, and then they will be telling you what they need you to do, right? As the campaign gears up, how you can be most helpful to Joe Biden. And that's where the direction should come from. You're going to be getting your talking points from them. They're going to be making the arguments that we're going to be following. The arguments they're making, the language they're using in the ads that they're producing, that's going to be the vernacular, the language of this campaign. It's all going to come from the campaign. I mean, we're entering a very different moment in American politics where everything that matters is going to flow through the Biden campaign. And they're going to be setting the discourse, the talking points, the imagery, and everything else. And by the way, the Biden campaign just released this afternoon a powerful new ad around choice with Joe Biden that I'll be featuring on Hopium tomorrow. I just saw it right before I came on here. Again, going deep into the emotional core of what people are most concerned about in America. They're not pulling any punches. They're not playing on the edges of this game. These guys are here to win. Joe Biden, this is the fourth time Joe Biden will have been on the ticket as a presidential candidate. He was twice with Obama. This is his second run. This guy knows what it's like to run for president, and he wants to win. You can tell it in the speech he gave, and I think you can tell it in the vibe coming from the campaign itself now that it's starting to mount. Let me make one other just point while we're waiting for Anderson. And some of you have heard me talk about this before, and I want to just go back to the speech for a second. The speech began, for those of you who are Hopium active here and have heard me talk a lot over the last year, that I talk a lot about the Four Freedoms speech that FDR gave in January of 1941. It's a sort of a foundational thing of Hopium land, that speech was the most important speech given probably ever in American English. And that's the speech that Joe Biden referenced at the very beginning of his speech. And he didn't describe it as the Four Freedoms speech, but he talked about how it was the call to fight for democracy here in America. And I just want to reflect on that for a minute, because this is, yes, Catherine, I agree with you. It still applies today. That speech that FDR gave in January of 1941 is really the reason that I'm here and the reason I am doing Hopium. Because what that speech did is that it articulated a vision for the world that was built upon freedom and not dominion and not authoritarianism and not autocracy. It was an extension of the American project to the rest of the world. And FDR argued in this moment of crisis for the world that we could imagine a world that was built upon freedom. And those four freedoms became baked into the Atlantic Charter between the United States and the United Kingdom, which became the basis of the allied relationship that won World War II. They became the foundation of the UN Charter in 1945 that imagined a new and different kind of world that wasn't based on force, but on opportunity and freedom. They became the foundation of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, which again imagined a world not of dominion, but of opportunity and freedom. And that world that FDR imagined was one that was then built by all of us. And what's happened in this time since FDR's presidency and that speech is that that world that America imagined and built created a golden age in human history. There's never been a better time to be alive in all of human history than there's been in this period since the 1940s. Life expectancy has gone from 45 years to 71 years. More people have lived under democracy in recent decades than any time in human history. Extreme poverty has plummeted despite a huge explosion of the population. And education levels have reached levels that are unprecedented in all of human history. There's never been a better time to be alive. There's never been a time where you were more capable as just a regular person to pursue your dreams, wherever you came from, than in this period since the 1940s, this world that FDR imagined that we all built together. And what's important for us as Democrats to understand is that this golden age in human history is something that we built. We did this. This is something we did together. This is the greatest contribution of the Democratic Party to the world. And what I like to say is that because of what we did, that we've created more opportunity for more people than any other political system in all of human history, that the Democratic Party is the most consequential political force for good in all of human history. We can have that debate and that discussion. I believe it to be true. And it's because of that is why I'm here. I'm here at Hopium, started Hopium a year ago, because our party, as Joe Biden said, was called once before. Our country was called once before to defend freedom and democracy here and around the world. And we in America and the Democratic Party answered that call. We're being called again. It's not exactly the same, but we're being called in a different way. Because that world that we imagined and built that created this golden age in all of human history and more opportunity for more people than any other political system there's ever been is under assault. And it's under assault by Russia and China and by Iran and Hezbollah and Hamas and all of their allies in the Middle East. That world that we imagined and built is now under threat in unprecedented ways. It's under threat by MAGA here and Donald Trump here domestically. And it's what we have to understand is that it's why this work we're doing is so consequential. Because if American democracy were to fall, then that world that we imagined and built would fall, and that the opportunities that people have had will fall with them. And so the stakes in this election could not be higher, right? It's not just about our democracy and the Democratic Party and MAGA. It's about the great democratic experiment in a world that has created more opportunity and done more good for more people than any other political system. That's why I'm here. That's why I do this work at Hopium. That's why I'm here with all of you, because I believe that we're in this hinge point in history. And when Joe Biden began his State of the Union speech with the speech that I reference here all the time at Hopium, I was so proud because I think that it is because what it meant was that what I was talking to you about was true in terms of the gravity of the moment, the historical contribution of our party, the significance of this speech that Joe Biden was giving, the call that he has made to all of us to join him in defending freedom and democracy here and around the world. This is a huge moment. And what I'm proud of is that all of you have responded to this call, that we are responding to the call. Proud patriots in this country are fighting with everything they got to prevent their democracy and freedom from slipping away. But as successful as we've been, we all understand that our most important work is ahead of us in this election. And it's why we're all here tonight and why we're going to be working together with everything we got and leaving it all on the playing field in this election for the American people and the people of the world. Let me go. I wanted to get that out because that's the extended version of Simon. We're going to be hearing from Anderson in just a minute. So Tracy Sherman asks about young people. Young people are not apathetic. Polling shows that this group of young people in America are the most politically engaged generation in modern polling history. And we've also seen very high youth turnout in all recent elections. The expectation is we will have very high youth turnout in this election too, in all likelihood. I'm optimistic that, as I said earlier, that we have powerful tools to communicate and speak to young people, powerful arguments to make to bring them along. I went through some of them tonight, and I'm optimistic that we can have an historic performance with young people if we do the work together in the coming months. Let me go to one or two more here. Somebody asked, I'm going to be making House endorsements. Right now we're raising money for Joe Biden, the North Carolina Democratic Party, which we've raised over $100,000 for. We're raising money for Ruben Gallego. And the strategy behind that is that North Carolina is the one state that we're in the battleground that we didn't win last time. We've underperformed. The reason why I think we've underperformed is we haven't had a strong party and a strong institution underneath. Anderson Clayton, who you'll meet in a minute, is building that. We needed to give her this early money to build out the organization. She doesn't have the kind of legacy of the victories that we've had in these other battleground states. She's got the hardest job in the battleground. We wanted to give her early resources. Ruben Gallego, similarly, because Sinema was in that race until very recently, is a little bit behind in money and organization. And so this was also, I felt, super high value add in both of these races. We'll be adding 6 to 8 House races soon. But part of the premise of Hopium is that I'm not out there trying to, get in front of the work that you do with your, in your own communities. I mean, job one is Joe Biden. Job two is making sure that we win in your home communities, and particularly for those of you in California and New York, you have really important work to do to flip those House seats back in California and New York that we lost in 2022. That's going to be central to how we win the House back. And then the Hopium work to me is supplemental to all this core work that you do in your own communities with Joe Biden. And I'll be making light endorsements. We won't be endorsing tons of races. I don't have opinions about lots of stuff. Not doing the kind of research needed to give you recommendations about groups to give to. I won't be doing that. I mean, I'll be showcasing the things that I think are most important, keeping that list narrow and small. And so we can really make a big difference. I'm really proud that we've already raised over $150,000 for Joe Biden. We've raised over $100,000 for Anderson Clayton. We've raised over 50,000 in a week for Ruben Gallego. I sent Ruben the number. Ruben's a friend, and I sent him how much we'd raised today, and he was blown away. And I'm hoping that we get Ruben to come speak to us next week. We're working on it with his staff. I'd like to get him before the March filing deadline because of all the Senate candidates in my mind. He's the one that's in most need of money at this point. But all of you also know, for those of you who are paid members, that on our chat every day, people are sharing stories about how they're involved in getting connected and making sure that the work you're doing is meaningful. But job one, Biden. Job two, what you need to do at home. Job three, there's going to be some Hopium stuff. And then, whatever you feel is where, is most where you connect with, that feels most important to you. There are in the Hopium chat every day, there are lots of people doing amazing work, sharing the opportunities that they're involved in. And to me, that's the best way you can learn about the opportunities for volunteerism, is through other people who are finding the work they're doing meaningful. Rather than me telling you, I'd rather let them tell you, because their testimony and their affirmation that this is good work and they're getting something out of it is way more important than anything that I can share with all of you. Okay, let me go to a few more questions. And I know Anderson, I'm sure what I'm most terrified by is that she's trying to get in and I can't see her, right? Because I'm here by myself tonight, just doing my thing. Okay, let me go to a few more questions. Yeah, I want to be very clear. I have a little bit of a contrarian view on the economy, and if you read my stuff, is that I don't think Americans are down on the economy, and I don't think they're down on Biden and the economy. I think that Republicans are down on the economy, and Republicans are down on Biden. Democrats give Biden a very, very high approval rating on the economy. They don't think the economy is doing poorly. Other polling shows that people in this country have very high satisfaction currently now with incomes and their life and their jobs. There is more sense that things are better than is indicated in the discourse in America. And I think we can't be cowed by that. I mean, the economy right now may be stronger than any economy that any of us will ever experience the rest of our lives. And we have to have the courage to say that, right? I mean, it isn't true the economy is bad. It isn't true that large numbers of people are being left behind. These things may have been true before, they're not true now. And, you know, the economy, it's almost impossible to imagine an economy that's stronger than the economy is right now. And we have to take credit for that. You can't score in life if you don't shoot. You know, it's my view that the way we need to talk about this is that things were hard. COVID was hard, right? Inflation was high. You know, there were lots of people unemployed. It was a scary time, but that time's behind us, right? That's how things were. That is not how things are anymore. We've put that period behind us. The economy is remarkably strong. And I think we have to have the courage to be able to understand as Democrats that if you're a struggling person who feels like you're not keeping up, would the message be that things are going well and so you've got an opportunity to move ahead? Or should the message be that everything is terrible and so the chances of you getting ahead are much less likely than otherwise? I think we have a lot of work to do here as Democrats to understand how to communicate our values in a glass half full setting. It's a core understanding of mine from all the years I've done work. I think telling people that we haven't done a good job and that things are terrible is how you lose elections, right? I mean, people have to believe that you've done a good job and things are better for you to get reelected. And so we have to be less, I think, cowed or coward by this idea that there have been some people who've been left behind and we can't be too loud and proud about our accomplishments. I reject that 100%. I think it is a reason why there is not deeper understanding in the public about the success of the Democratic Party. I go through this in my presentation. There have been 51 million jobs created in America since 1989. 49 million of them have been created by Democratic presidents, basically all of them. We've seen 3 consecutive Democratic presidents who've had strong job growth, lower deficits, you know, wages and incomes going up. 3 consecutive Republican presidents that brought recession and higher deficits and American decline. We should not be losing the economic argument to these folks. But if our understanding of how to communicate is that things are bad and we're going to fix it, as opposed to things can get better with the right policies, and we've made them better now in 3 consecutive presidencies, I think we're not making our best argument. And yes, I am a contrarian on this. There is not universal agreement. Anderson, welcome. Let me turn it over to you. Simon's had enough time talking to everybody. Let me introduce, we've got 10 minutes left, everybody. Anderson is probably the hardest working Democratic operative in the country. I can't imagine how she keeps all this going. She's on MSNBC, she's on Zooms, she's doing everything because she's leaving it all on the playing field for her state of North Carolina. Meet the youngest chair in the country, Anderson Clayton, 26 years old. You wouldn't know it from her gumption and her spirit and her passion, and she brings to her work every day. You know, I got behind Anderson, and Hopian got behind Anderson because after having seen her speak and done my research, I knew that what we were looking at was an extraordinary leader who was meeting the moment and at a time when North Carolina needed somebody to go liberate them from one of the most right-wing political machines in the country. And we're all lucky that Anderson has stepped up. And so Anderson, the reason I asked you to come by tonight is you just had a primary, right, last week. You're now in the general. Give us an update. How are things going? How do you feel? What should we know about what's happening in North Carolina now?
Yeah, hello. Community that is out there right now. That's what I feel like every time that I join Simon, is that I'm joining a community of folks that really care about democratic policies. And just thank you, Simon, so much for making North Carolina one of your states this year, because I am so fortunate For those of you that are on here listening right now, I came in here as the 25-year-old state party chair, and everyone looked at me and they said, man, how is she going to raise the money that she needs to make this possible in North Carolina? And Simon looked at me and he said, I'm not going to ask you how, I'm going to help you do it. And so thank you to all of you two for joining in that effort and that cause for him and helping North Carolina in the battleground status that it has right now, but doing all things that we've been able to do. We just came out of a really hectic primary season for folks that have looked at it on the Republican side of things, especially. So we have Mark Robinson, who won the governor's nomination for the Republican Party coming out of Super Tuesday in North Carolina this last election cycle, right? And Mark Robinson, for those of you that aren't familiar with him, is our current lieutenant governor. Mark Robinson got in office because he went to a Greensboro city council meeting and he got up in front of the entire city council and he said, you know, it's not people that are the problem, or it's not guns that are the problem, it's people that are the problem here. And that people have too many mental health problems and they're the problems and not guns. And so Mark Robinson really became the NRA's favorited pick, right, to end up being in the lieutenant governor's office after never having run for public office in his life and also never have been involved with our political system. He's someone that said he fundamentally believes in stripping away the right to vote from women and wish that was a time and wish we were back in a time when that happened. And also is someone that has said he does not believe in the Holocaust. He believes that Hitler was actually a nice person. And that also is someone that has fundamentally said that he would strip abortion access from women overall in the state of North Carolina this year. And we're looking at on the opposite side of that in our state, on the Democratic side, our Democratic nominee for governor, the wonderful and the incredible Josh Stein, who is our current attorney general right now, someone that has spent his entire career protecting the people of North Carolina, in particular being one of the first attorney generals in the entire country to take on Juul, which is, you know, our e-cigarette company that has really poisoned young people. Excuse for all my folks out there that love smoking them. I'm sorry about it, but they're also poisoning you. But just to make sure that we have someone that has led the Consumer Protection Bureau for the Attorney General's office before, and also someone that has really gone after protecting abortion rights, was one of the first attorney generals to say he would not prosecute or sue any doctor that performed abortion access in North Carolina after our 12-week ban came down last year from the Republican supermajority in our GOP. He is an amazing attorney general. And so we've got a stark contrast this year for coming out of Super Tuesday in North Carolina for the most competitive governor's race in the entire country right now. Sorry, Simon, I hope that was a good little bit, but
No, it's great
to go down ballot too, because they didn't just do it in our governor's race. We got some crazy people that are running for office in our Council of State down ballot in North Carolina as well right now.
And 2 points everyone should realize is that of the battleground states, the 2 states that were really hijacked and manipulated by very right-wing Republican parties were North Carolina and Wisconsin. And in many of the other states, Pennsylvania and Michigan, right, we've beaten it back. We've now built, you know, these political machines in those states. You know, we just liberated Wisconsin from this redistricting that was keeping this essentially a state that was no longer really a democracy. And the last one that's like that is North Carolina, right? So this is not, you know, despite the fact this is a sort of a 50-50 state, the polling makes it very clear that it's 50-50 state. We've seen, you know, the Republicans have gerrymandered and changed the rules about how much power the governor has to create something that doesn't feel like a democracy any longer in North Carolina. And so in addition to being the most important presidential battleground expansion state that we have, there's also an urgency because of the radical nature of the Republican Party in North Carolina for the good people of North Carolina. And I feel very motivated by that. And then Anderson, let me ask a couple. We just saw the first public independent poll had Josh Stein up by 2 points, right? In the early polling, and also your attorney general candidate. Can you talk about a little bit about him and then maybe offer your thoughts in the early days about the Biden race as well?
Yeah, right now in North Carolina, we're looking at the top of the ticket that is full of an insurrectionist, election denier, and abortion rights denier sort of ticket and party. You've got Donald Trump at the top of the ticket. You've got Mark Robinson at the governor's office, and you've got Dan Bishop, who is fundamentally one of the leaders in HB2 and also a big Donald Trump supporter, right, running for attorney general against the one Jeff Jackson, who unfortunately, because of those redistricted maps that we just had come down from our Supreme Court right this last year, losing his seat in Congress due to gerrymandered maps. And so Congressman Jackson was successful coming out of the Super Tuesday primary for the Attorney General's race in North Carolina. And we're very, very excited to be supporting him this year. Jeff is obviously, as a lot of you know, been our TikTok star, but he has also been someone that has just been an extreme advocate, is a lawyer himself out of Mecklenburg County, and really took on, I mean, the big thing that we're saying to North Carolinians this year is that you deserve like representation that protects people in every office and every bit of government, people that care about democracy, but more so care about the folks in North Carolina. And so also something else that I think people would be interested in, our superintendent race. Which is really, really important this year when you think about the future of public schools in North Carolina. Michelle Morrow won our superintendent race for the Republican ticket this year. And she is someone that was at January 6th. She was at the insurrection with Donald Trump and with all the MAGA extremism on the Republican side of things. And so making sure that we are looking at Mo Green, who is running for superintendent. He's the former superintendent in Guilford County in North Carolina, also the former attorney for the Charlotte-Mecklenburg school system right now, and is someone that actually knows public schools. What we're looking at in North Carolina with if Michelle Morrow wins the superintendent race is the fact that it will take us back to a place where public schools do not exist in North Carolina. And what Oklahoma is dealing with right now and what other states like Idaho are experiencing right now, we could be put right back in that threshold if we're not careful in this election cycle. And I see a lot of people in the chat box, to their credit, Simon, asking me, how is this race so close? How is anything so close right now? And I think I need to remind everybody, Mark Robinson is already the current lieutenant governor in North Carolina. He has won a statewide election, and that's because people do not know who the man is. And so you all can go to realmarkrobinson.com. It's a website the state party has created. We are trying to make sure that we brand this person this year and that folks know who Mark is when they go to vote, and that they know who Josh Stein is when they go to vote as well. And the same thing with every candidate down ballot.
So Anderson, two last questions. When people have given you money through the Hopium site, what are you doing with it? And then second of all, tell me about, what was my other question about? Oh, how can people volunteer to help you if they've already given you money or can't afford it? How can they help you from out of state? I mean, North Carolina Carolinians, I can't say that word, can just volunteer through the party, but are there volunteer opportunities for people from outside of North Carolina to help you?
Yeah, absolutely. The fun fact that I like to give to folks is that 52% of North Carolina is made up of transplants right now, which means seeing an out-of-state bumper sticker in my state or an out-of-state license plate in my state isn't ironic to us or stand out to us. Honestly, it's normal now in North Carolina. So bring everybody in. If you can drive in, if you're in Virginia or Georgia or some other state that's close to us, we'd love to have your help this year. Maybe Georgia, stay in your own state, but still Virginia, we'd take y'all any day. But also looking at other places that are really impactful. What we were able to do with the money that was raised this year, thank you, Simon Rosenberg, and this wonderful community that you were a part of, because we were able to put 2 more organizers on the ground from the money that came in from this community. And so we already have 3 organizers that are active in North Carolina. We've divided them up between the western part of the state, the Piedmont, and the eastern, and we are about to expand that program to be able to be even more reaching. I told the Biden campaign, I joked with them at one point, I said, we're starting your coordinated early for you. And what we're doing right now is going out and we're knocking doors in communities that, you know, we're knocking the GOTV universe right now. And we're talking to people that would normally say, you know, you only show up at our doorstep 3 weeks before the election cycle. And what's that about? And we're like, no, we're going to show up 8 months before the election cycle happens. And we're going to knock your door once, and then we're going to knock your door again. And we're going to be back to knock it a third time too, just to make sure that you know that Democrats are not giving up on your votes this year. Because what we're experiencing in North Carolina, it is a turnout problem, y'all. It is not a persuasion problem. We have the Democrats, but we do have to get them to turn out to vote. And that's what we've seen every single year, is the slow decline actually in Democratic turnout in this state right now. And so North Carolina doesn't want to be a Florida. We want to go be a Georgia, and we want to be the beacon of the South again in so many ways in 2024. And we believe that the roadmap to the White House goes right through us. So thank you so much, Simon, for everything that you've done for us. We really appreciate it.
Anderson, you're amazing. It's been great to be in partnership with you. Thanks for the update on what you've done with the money that we've raised. It's so inspiring. And for those of you who want to get involved, you can go to the Hopium site and get connected there, but you also can go directly to the North Carolina Democratic Party site. And part of the reason, and I'll let Anderson go, is that what she said to me, the most important thing she just said, is that I wanted this money to be a bridge for her to get her organization ready to go before the Biden campaign came in, because North Carolina needs a little bit of extra help. We haven't been winning there, and it's why we made this such a priority. So Anderson, Good luck. Thank you for all that you're doing. It's been a lot of fun to work with you. And I know you'll be coming back and giving us an update sometime this summer. And again, everyone, spread the good word. Yes, we have to help Joe Biden, but the second best way to help Joe Biden is by helping Anderson Clayton. So thanks, everybody. Have a terrific night. Thank you for year one of Hopium. Let's go fight win. And let's go have some dinner for those of us on the East Coast. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Simon.